Haribol, Dandavat Pranam. So now we are continuing our reading of these articles written by Vrindaranya dāsī about how bhakti is both inherent and bestowed. And she's establishing from our previous acharyas that bhakti is both. It's not only inherent and it's not only bestowed, but both are happening simultaneously. And so, because this is what our recent acharyas give so much emphasis on, especially Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and those coming in his line, they give so much emphasis to this. But then people are saying, but our previous acharyas, the Goswamis, they didn't explain this. And now she's showing how actually, no, our Goswamis did explain this. It's all throughout. It's in this Srila Jiva Goswami Sandarbha all throughout. And she will, right in this article number 4, let me minimize this. She'll be showing how, this is on the, harmonist.us, and she'll be showing how all our 4 acharyas, as well as, and Baladev Vijabhushan especially, they are telling the same thing. So see, she goes through Baladev Vijabhushan's conclusions on this matter, Srila Ramanujacharya, Nimbarka, Sri Madhvacharya, Sri Vallabha, and then also Baladev Vijabhushan revisited. So yeah, we'll go through this. And this is actually where the articles start getting a bit more technical, are philosophically terse. So I'll just jump right into it. I'll do a quick Jaidwani. Jai Srila Gurudev ki Jai, Jai Srila Prabhupada ki Jai, Jai Shri Rupanu Gauriya Guru Varga ki Jai, Saparshad Shri Gaur Nityananda Prabhu ki Jai, Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopigan ki Jai, Shri Tulsi Maharani Vrindadevi ki Jai, Shri Giriraj Maharaj ki Jai, Srila Satchir Ananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur ki Jai, Srila Jiva Goswami Par ki Jai, Shri Shad Goswami ki Jai, Shri Characharya ki Jai, Chara Sampradaya ki Jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaiṣṇava Vrinda ki Jai, Shri Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol. So the Simultaneous Inherency and Bestowal of Bhakti, Part 4. This is Understanding Vaiṣṇava Vedānta. Published on September 15th by Vrindaranya dāsī. As I will show in this article, all the major schools of Vaiṣṇava Vedānta agree that being a servant of Bhagavan is intrinsic to the jiva, but that this truth is covered by illusion. Gauriya Vedanta, as propounded by Baladev Vijabhushan in Govinda Bhashya, his commentary on the Vedanta Sutra, is no exception. If we are to believe the understanding of those who hold that bhakti is not simultaneously bestowed and inherent, then Jiva Goswami differs from these venerable Vaishnavas on this fundamental point. Furthermore, according to the bestowal-only understanding, Jiva Goswami's conception of the intrinsic nature of the jiva is closer in alignment with Shankaracharya, who says that the jivas are ultimately mere contentless consciousness, than with the other Vaishnavacharyas. Although this understanding is still an upgrade from that of Shankaracharya, because those who advocate bestowal only still holds that the Sarup Shakti has attributes, it is a downgrade from that of other Vaishnavacharyas, who holds that the soul also has attributes. So first, Baladev Vijabhushan. Govinda Bhashya, which Sri Govinda inspired Baladev Prabhu to write in a dream, was composed when the Gaudiya Sampradaya's legitimacy was challenged. Baladev Vijabhushan studied the Gaudiya literature, including the Sandarbhas, in Vrindavan under the shelter of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, his Shiksha Guru. Just as, and there's a quote, who's the quote from? I'm just curious. whatever. It's all the way at the bottom. Quote is from Narang Dr. Sudesh, Vaishnava philosophy according to Baladev Vijayabhushan. Okay. So, just as Rupa and Sanatan taught Jiva, so Vishwanath and others trained Baladev. He strikingly resembles Jiva in the range of his interests and knowledge. In the Gaudiya sect, he is known as Jiva II, as Jiva was preeminently a philosopher and grammarian. So also was Baladev. Srimad Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami upheld that if Srila Baladev Vijayabhushan had not been present at that time, our Gaudiya Vaishnava identity would have disappeared from this world. He established all the principles and philosophies established by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This observation was noted by others as well. The Gaudiya sect is highly indebted to Baladev. But for Baladev, the Gaudiya sect would have gone into oblivion. Rasik Vihari Joshi adds, it was only after his writing of the Govinda Bhashya that Gaudiya Vaishnavism became recognized as an independent school of Vaiṣṇava Vedānta. Baladev Vijayabhushan's understanding of Gaudiya Siddhanta is thus extremely significant to our understanding of Gaudiya Vedanta as established in the Sandarbhas and other foundational Gaudiya literature. Who better to help us understand Jiva Goswami than he who is considered a second Jiva? Thus, at the end of this article, I will compare his interpretation of Vaiṣṇava Vedanta to the other luminaries presented. Sri Ramanuja. Sri Ramanuja is the earliest proponent of Vaiṣṇava Vedanta of those who I will outline. His Vishishta Advaita doctrine holds that forgetfulness that one is a shesh, a servant of God, is due to karma born. It is due to karma born ignorance. When this is removed by enlightenment, and the jiva realizes himself as the eternal and natural attendant of an all-powerful, all-perfect, and all-blissful being, the jiva only derives the highest bliss, and not the wretchedness of worldly subservience. In Ramanuja's theology, God manifests the world in sport, lila. That is, he is not lacking anything, but out of his fullness, he plays. However, his cosmic play involves linking the jivas within him to external karmic bodies that they may ultimately attain. However, his cosmic play involves linking the jivas within him to external karmic bodies that they may ultimately attain eternal life in relation to him. The jivas are designed to serve him. In his Gita commentary, Ramanuja writes, being supremely compassionate, Parama Karunika, he caused them to emanate, Shrishtva, along with sacrifice, yajna, instituted for the worship of himself. This is, of course, a reference to the karma marg. However, in Ramanuja's Vedanta, karma leads to jnana, and jnana leads to bhakti, by which mukti is attained and the jiva's purpose in life is fulfilled in eternal service to God. Alternatively, the jiva may adopt the path of Sharanagati, understood by Ramanuja as a joyful acknowledgement of the metaphysical fact, which was previously hidden from the devotee. The fact that the jiva is by its very nature a servant of God. It is a part of the whole that exists exclusively for the purpose of serving the whole. God is the Sheshi, the absolute ruler, and the jiva is his Shesh, his servant, who, upon realizing this, understands his destiny and essence. So the jiva, who upon realizing this, that he's the servant of God, understands his destiny and essence, that is to give delight to his Sheshi, his master, God. So Sheshi, God, Shesha, the servant. Now Sri Nimbarka. Sri Nimbarka's Dvaita doctrine similarly maintains. The jiva, however, is an angsha, a potency of Ishvar, and so he retains his essential nature, though it is obscured by avidya constituted of beginningless karma, while he is in a state of bondage. Okay, so he retains his essential nature, though it is obscured by avidya, constituted of beginningless karma, while he's in bondage. When liberated, he realizes himself in his true relationship with the Lord. Nimbarka's Vedanta also explains that the jiva's ultimate attainment is twofold: attainment of qualities similar to Bhagavan's qualities, Brahma Swarup Labh, and the full development of one's own individuality, Atma Swarup Labh, the later of which involves the full attainment of the jiva's knowledge and bliss, untainted and unimpeded by matter. Avidya covers the jiva's knowledge and bliss when he wanders in samsara. Although it is only Brahman who is fully constituted of bliss, Anandamaya, Dvaitavad acknowledges that the jiva is constituted of a small portion of bliss. Nimbarka's Vedanta posits that this bliss of the jiva and its entire being is fully manifest upon realizing Brahman as a ras, citing Taittiriya Upanishad 2.7. And the individual soul, the knower, is possessed of bliss in accordance with the text. For verily, on getting this essence, one becomes blissful. In other words, by attaining God as ras, the jiva's own ananda, the joy of his being, is realized, and it tastes ras. The date of Nimbarkacharya's appearance remains unclear, and scholars have tended to give him quite a late date. Recent studies, however, suggest that Nimbarka's Vedanta Parijata Saurabha may well be the earliest commentary on the Vedanta Sutra available, earlier even than that of Shankaracharya's. Wow, so that's one of the most... Wow, so that could be the earliest commentary on Vedanta Sutra, which is the foundation on all of our principles, which Srimad, like all of our teachings, which Srimad Bhagavatam is the commentary of. So, Sri Madhvacharya. Likewise, Sri Madhvacharya's Dvaitavad Vedanta posits, in the endless movement of time, the jiva is caught as a captive in the how do you say that word? Transmigratory, I think. Yeah. So let me read that. In the endless movement of time, the jiva is caught as a captive in the transmigratory cycle, going from birth to death and death to birth, to reap the fruits of his own actions through enjoyment and suffering. Such a fate has befallen the jiva because of swabhava gyan, or avidya, the ignorance of his real nature, which is characterized by consciousness and bliss, and a sense of dependence on the divine. So there also, bliss. An important aspect of the decisive contribution which Madhva has made to the interpretation of the problem of life and its diversities is his insight that the sameness of essence does not rule out individual variety. Now she gives, here's a quote. However beginningless the chain of karma may be, it is still incapable of explaining why a particular course of action has been pursued in preference to another, without reference to an ultimate difference in the nature and makeup of each moral agent. Sameness or equality of essence does not rule out individual variations, but such underlying variations of degrees must be recognized if plurality of selves is to have any real meaning or justification. Identity, sameness of consciousness, would render the present multiplicity of personalities purposeless. Yes. identity, sameness of consciousness, would render the present multiplicity of personalities purposeless. Okay, now Sri Vallabha's conclusions. Sri Vallabhacharya was a contemporary of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. His Shuddhadvaita doctrine holds, Jivas are countless in number and come out of the akshar like sparks of fire, endowed only with Chaitanya consciousness and no Ananda. It is not that the Ananda nature is lost. It is only concealed, owing to ignorance brought about by the will of the Purushottam, whose divine sport the jiva and the world are meant to serve. Okay, so that makes sense. He says he's endowed only with Chaitanya and no Ananda, but it's not saying that the jiva has no Ananda, really. It's that Ananda nature is lost. It is only concealed, owing to ignorance brought about by the will of Purushottam, whose divine sport the jiva. Okay. God manifests the world out of sport. However, his sport or drama to be meaningful requires players for him to interact with. Thus, the one becomes many and interacts with them, the jivas. Notably, there are different types of souls in Vallabha's perspective, and among those suited to attain liberation, their inherent makeup determines the nature of their liberated life. Each type attains his own nature in the service of God. In God's world drama, he alone, as its director, chooses which particular roles are given to which artists for the performance. Bhagavan assigns roles at the onset of the world's cycle, and no one has the power to make changes in the choice of the fruit, the path, the means, or the life that Bhagavan assigns to any particular being. For some types of souls, the life he assigns is ultimately a liberated one. And again, the enlightenment and liberation of these jivas in Vallabha's Vedanta involves the removal of the veil covering of their inherent... Sorry, let me reread that. The enlightenment and liberation of these jivas in Vallabha's Vedanta involves the removal of the veil covering their inherent ananda. Among the types of souls designed for liberation, Vallabhacharya's Pushti and Maryada souls are of particular interest to Gaudiya Vaishnavas. Each attain different forms of liberated life in relation to God by treading the bhakti paths of the same name, Pushti and Maryada. In his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Rupa Goswami writes that these two paths are more or less the same as the paths he outlines, Raganuga and Vaidhi. Vallabhacharya specifies that there are Maryada and Pushti jivas. They are designed for particular seva to Bhagavan, arising from his will. Baladev Vijabhushan teaches that there is a gradation of souls in terms of karma and bhakti, taratamya. Taratamya is the very term that Madhvacharya uses in speaking of gradation of souls, some of whom are designed as servants of Bhagavan. According to the Gaudiya Vedanta, all jivas are similar in terms of their 21 characteristics, but they obviously cannot be exactly the same and still be different individual jivas. The external differences resulting from karma are actually derived from differences of internal volition. The same holds true for spiritual differences, which are based on the jiva's will, as part 17 of this series explains. So now we're going back to Baladev Vijabhushan's understanding. Sri Baladev Vijabhushan revisited. Finally, in turning to Gaudiya Vedanta, we defer to Baladev Vijabhushan, the author of the Govinda Bhashya commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. Sri Baladev posits that all jivas are similar in that they are all conscious entities endowed with knowledge, bliss, and 8 other attributes. In his Gita Bhushana 15.1, Sri Baladev mentions the 8 attributes of the Atma: freedom from sin, freedom from old age, freedom from death, freedom from grief, freedom from hunger, freedom from thirst, fulfillment of desire, satyakam, and fulfillment of will, resolve, satya sankalpa, along with knowledge and bliss. In his Gita Bhushana 3.17, he describes the Atma as possessed of the attribute of self-manifesting bliss. Similarly, in 3.43, he describes the Atma as possessing condensed knowledge and bliss. Because spiritual bliss implies bhakti, those who hold that bhakti is not inherent consequently say that the bliss of the jiva is actually only the absence of suffering. I address this point in subsequent articles of this series, but for now it is interesting to note that their understanding does not align with that of Baladev Vijayabhushan, since condensed bliss can hardly be merely an absence of suffering. After all, you can't condense an absence. Condensed bliss. How can you condense freedom from suffering? So yeah, you can't condense an absence. Nor can an absence self-manifest. As I will explain in more detail in part 17 of this series, Baladev Vijayabhushan discusses how the liberated soul attains a spiritual body in his commentary on Vedanta Sutra, beginning with 4.4.1. Describing how such a soul attains a spiritual body by bhakti and moves about laughing and playing, he makes the point that the phrase accomplishing one's own form, svena rupena abhinishpadyate, means manifesting one's own form because the word svena, his own, is used. Okay, he makes the point that this phrase svena rupena abhinishpadyate, accomplishing one's own form, means manifesting one's own form because the word svena, his own, is used. This insight of Baladev Vijayabhushan is extremely important because it shows that even though the specific form, the rupena, is bestowed upon a soul who has received bhakti, it is nonetheless inherent. So even though it's bestowed upon the soul, it is nonetheless inherent. Okay. Grace and conclusion. Another point that all the acharyas agree on is that grace is an essential condition of liberation. As such, they also concur that there is no jivan mukti in the sense that Advaita Vedantins understand the term. There's no jivan mukti. How do the Advaita Vedantins understand the term? They say that liberation of a jiva without bhakti, they say that jivan mukti means liberation of a jiva without bhakti while he is still in the material body. So, all the acharyas, they agree that this is not jivan mukti. Jivan mukti isn't liberation of a jiva without bhakti while he is still in the material body. For all the Vaiṣṇava Vedantins, one's true nature can only be realized in relation to the Lord. As such, the idea that the jiva's nature is merely eternal consciousness, free from material suffering, does not find support in any of their commentaries on Vedanta Sutra. As we have seen, Ramanujacharya, Nimbarkacharya, Madhvacharya, Vallabhacharya, and Baladev Vijayabhushan all agree that knowledge and bliss are inherent in the jiva, and they hold that the jiva is intrinsically a servant of Bhagavan, although the jiva is covered by Maya. Although this is exactly what Sri Jiva says, those who argue against simultaneous inherency and bestowal have a misleading way of interpreting his words, such that many of the soul's inherent characteristics disappear on closer inspection. Thus, we should be aware that to argue against simultaneous inherency and bestowal is a radical departure from the other Vaishnava traditions. Let us be clear on what exactly their position is. So what is their position? They argue that jivas are not inherently meant to serve God even in the teleological sense. In teleological sense, that means the purpose for which they exist. Although they agree that the soul is eternal and conscious, they say that the soul has no inherent knowledge or ananda, only consciousness and a lack of material suffering. Their conception is that the soul is essentially a blank slate and is only a doer, knower, and enjoyer in potential. Such a potential is realized when the soul identifies with a material or spiritual body, both of which they consider to be constitutionally different from the soul. One example they give of this concept is that the soul is like a car battery and the body, material or spiritual, is the car. This understanding makes the jiva's sojourn profoundly purposeless. This understanding makes the jiva's sojourn profoundly purposelessness, culminating in redundancy. Like an extra battery for a car that won't ever need a new battery because it powers itself. As we have seen, this interpretation of Jiva Goswami is a radical departure from other Vaishnava acharyas. Thus, rather than thinking that Baladev Vijayabhushan differs from Jiva Goswami, the more likely conclusion is that those who advocate the bestowal-only position differ from Jiva Goswami. In the next article, I will show how this is the case. By looking at the Jiva's 21 qualities as delineated by Jiva Goswami in the Paramatma Sandarbha, I will uncover some major contradictions in the bestowal-only position. All right, so I will... Yeah, this is kind of thing it's good to read twice to really let it sink in. And let's see this, I just want to understand this concept a little bit better. So they say that, I just want to reread this, sorry. They argue that the jivas are not inherently meant to serve God even in the teleological sense, the purpose for which the soul exists. Although they agree that the soul is eternal and conscious, they say that the soul has no inherent knowledge or ananda, only consciousness and a lack of material suffering. Their conception is that the soul is essentially a blank slate and is only a doer, knower, and enjoyer in potential. Such a potential is realized when the soul identifies with a material or spiritual body, both of which they consider to be constitutionally different from the soul. One example they give of this concept is that the soul is like a car battery and the body, material or spiritual, is the car. This understanding makes the jiva's sojourn profoundly purposelessness, culminating in redundancy, like an extra battery of a car that won't ever need new batteries because it powers itself. So I just want to see what she wrote on this. In this understanding, the soul's material sojourn is purposeless because what is the meaning of a car driving around with no person driving the car? A mere battery does not drive. As B.K.N. Sharma noted earlier in this article, identity of consciousness would render the present multiplicity of personalities purposeless. That's from Sharma, B.K.N., The Philosophy of Madhvacharya. All right, so, sorry, I just wanted to, I'm a bit slow, so I need to reread these things sometimes. Soon I don't know when, maybe tomorrow or the day after, I'll go through part 5 in this series. Where is it? The 21 intrinsic characteristics of the jiva. Okay, so Jai Shri Radhe. I'm going to stop now. Haribol. Let me know also if you have any questions about this. And if I don't know the answer, then I can still try to, I can ask people who know more than me and get the answer. All right. Haribol. Dandavat Pranam.